For years, Rwanda's media and public relations sectors seem to be existing in a state of oblivion. Many say that there hasn't been a clear-cut understanding between public relations and news reporting. Interestingly enough, just 6 years ago, public relations officers were mere office messengers. The definition of public relations as the conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is understood to a very small extent. But don't be surprised that it was and perhaps still is the same case with so-called news reporting of this age.
Well, yes and no. It will also depend on what agenda someone is pushing. But due to Rwandans' general mistrust in the media, I guess when someone, depending on how the reporting is done, someone might say that something is amiss, or they will wonder, they will view a certain report and wonder what is missing, or think about whether or not how it will affect how they will analyze the situation and how they break down the information they are receiving. So in some ways, they can look at a story and be like, you know what, this is not as objective, because how about the view of so-and-so? Why is this other party lacking in this story, and what is missing? And on the other part of no is, it will also depend on if, for example, if you're telling someone from the rural side of the country a story, then they might be more inclined to believe it. So there will be secondary factors to that, like education, background, and so on and so forth.
And when it comes to fellow journalists who are in this profession, I would say that there's a number of them who are able to tell public relations from journalism. So I would say that, generally speaking, Rwandans do not understand the difference between those two concepts, which are public relations and journalism.
Given the state of media in Rwanda, by state I mean our media is still young. Rwandans are not yet, haven't yet gone into analytical and logical reasoning and analyzing a story. So they don't really understand the difference between the two PR. By PR, they don't even know if PR exists. All they know is just you're giving them about the information about the company. You're telling them what happened in the company, or the company did this, the company that did that, and they know that's information.
Is understanding the issue, many ask. If the media practitioners and public relations officers understood their roles, would it make any difference? That is the hope. Not long ago, the BBC News economics editor Robert Peston explained that while some of his best friends are in PR, nevertheless, he has never been in any doubt that PRs are the enemy. In Rwanda, the conflict is like a sleeping lion. Nobody wants to wake up the lion. Journalists and editors are in constant contact with public relations officers, but only a small fraction of journalists are able to separate themselves from public relations. Consequently, their credibility in news reporting is compromised. But the biggest worry that is yet to be realized is that journalists themselves have not woken up to the reality that they are actually fighting a silent battle.
I don't think journalists do, because some have been known to seek incentives. So they will intentionally either have their news story lie in the part of, file a story that's more inclined to be PR, depending on if their incentives they're seeking from that institution or organization, or if they've been promised something. Or I think every time those two cross paths, I think it has been intentional.
Well, I would say that there are some journalists who, of course, understand the difference between those two concepts, and they are able to, like when they attend an event and that they are given a press release, which is given to them by, in most cases, public relations officers, they are able to dissect the content of the press releases, and then they move on to focusing on a particular aspect, on one of the aspects mentioned or talked about, highlighted in the press release, by delving deeper into that issue, to try to get additional information, to try to exhaustively treat that one aspect mentioned in the press release. But in other cases, you find journalists that tend, and I would say that there are many compared to the ones who are able to focus on a particular issue highlighted in a press release. There's a big number of journalists who tend actually to swallow, if I may use the term, the whole press release, and by swallowing here I mean to consider the whole press release by replicating, for instance, if the press release in English, you may find a journalist translating the whole of it and then regurgitating it to the readership or to their audience if it's in broadcast. So I would say that unfortunately we still have many journalists who are not able to to differentiate public relations and journalism work.
I would say yes, some journalists do, especially those who have gone to school. But there are some in Rwanda, this media industry is just growing. Some journalists, because journalism is a passion, doing media is a passion. Some just join the industry because they feel they have what it takes to be a journalist. They can go to the field, cover the story, publish it or edit it and voice it. So that's all they understand about journalism. But they don't know if there is this aspect of analyzing a story. If a PR house, if a PR office of an organization gives them a press release, they don't think they don't think the company is giving them a news idea. For them, it's news. It's the story. So to some extent, they don't. Some do. Some journalists do. Others they don't.
The task of the journalist is to give news impartially without fear or favor. But is this as easy as it sounds?
Well, I think people are still afraid, although we are coming to terms with the fact that journalists have been given press freedom and they have the right to information and that sort of thing. You would think that, but people are still, as individuals, more afraid to be controversial and that sort of thing, so it won't be as easy.
Obviously, it goes without saying that maybe I would start by saying that we have, unfortunately, we have such kind of, such cases whereby journalists are, manipulated by public relations officers or communication officers. And one of the tricks, or one of the things that the PR officers and communication officers use as a bait, is a little money, which is in most cases called transportation fee, and in such cases, it is hard for journalists to report objectively because they know that once they come up with something objective, with an article, which is objective, then they know that they're not, the next time they won't get that money, that the next time they're going maybe not to be invited for events organized by that entity providing them with the money.
In relation to PR, it's not easy, and it's not. Some have been able to report impartially, and some have been writing objectively, and some have been broadcasting objectively. But the biggest percentage in Rwanda, it's not been easy for them, because sometimes one thing some are being influenced by what they have been, the media houses give them, the companies give them in form of in what they call transport allowance. For such a person who is given transport allowance by a company, you don't expect that journalist to be objective.
In Rwanda, the media sector is still growing. The progress over the years has been slow. State media has been labeled an announcement station. Journalists say that the media is still grappling with issues of poverty or lack of resources, lack of investment, and freedom of expression. To media practitioners, these problems are giving the media fraternity sleepless nights, and oftentimes no thought is given to how public relations is killing objective news reporting. It is cases of poverty and low pay among journalists that are said to force journalists into scenarios where NGOs and other institutions give them some money to report on their activities. Then again, the media through which these stories are disseminated also raises a lot of eyebrows. They need to survive, so they will take any story. Journalists will go to the field not to gather information to package objective, impartial news stories, but to scout around for which institution or NGO has an event and is paying a small fee of between 5 to 20,000 Rwandan francs to have their story reported. Journalists in many fields would be hard-pressed to do their jobs without PR agents. They depend on them just as politicians depend on lobbyists to tell them how to vote on complicated legislation. For a PR agent to be effective, he or she needs to know how to sell the client with information that will not embarrass the journalist who uses it. It may be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth, but it had better be true enough. While private media in Rwanda may not find this a problem, the public broadcaster Rwanda Broadcasting Agency deals with this issue on a daily basis. It is quite difficult to evade, they say, because each and every institution out there believes that their activities, whether news or PR, must end up on the national TV station.
Now, publications, how it, I think, is killing journalism is because journalists today in Rwanda tend to report as publication officers, because basically they always talk about good things about a company, an entity, an institution, which to me I think is not right.
An institution like RBA being, we say it's a state. It came from being a state broadcaster to a public broadcaster. But again, given the fact that the government still provides it 60% of its budget, it cannot run away from doing PR for public agencies, for public institutions. I know journalists in RBA try to do their best and try to be objective, but again, there's that aspect, because sometimes they cannot say what those institutions want. Because they cannot say what those institutions don't want them to say. So there's no of dodging it.
At the same time as the PR industry seems to be imitating journalism, it also successfully infiltrates it. Among the most popular techniques designed to sow confusion about the origins of a message has been the adoption of the advertorial in newspapers and magazines, often called sponsored content on the web. In a world where ever more sophisticated public relations practices threaten to overwhelm what remains of honest journalistic institutions in terms of both money and numbers, we may be about to discover what it means to live with a constant information stream that is neither.